As she returned home that evening, her stepmother called her all sorts of degrading names, saying that her evil hair was the root cause of all the terrible things that had been happening. She called her dreadlocks evil snakes hanging on her head, saying that if she fails to cut her hair, evil will continue to be unleashed. Once upon a time, in the heart of a very small village, surrounded by vast green fields and dense forests, lived a girl named Zara. Zara was unlike any other girl in the village. Her dreadlocks set her apart from her peers, who made fun of her because of her hair. They would tug at her hair while she walked on the street, and some even went as far as believing that she was possessed. The dusty streets of the village often echoed with their jeers, as Zara tried to ignore them. Zara's mother spared no opportunity to tell her how special she was, but this was so hard for her to believe, as every other person in the village detested her because of her hair. One day, Zara was fetching some water from the village stream when a boy named Ayo arrived at the stream with his friends. Ayo was the son of a very wealthy man in the village. He was well known and respected, often seen riding on a majestic white horse that was the pride of his family. He approached Zara and requested that she give him some water from her clay pot. His friends laughed as they waited to see Zara's reaction. Without saying any word, Zara dipped a small calabash into her clay pot and offered it to Ayo, who was shocked at her calm demeanor. As Ayo drank from the calabash, he found himself staring at Zara's dreadlocks, and his friends wondered what had come over him. He handed the calabash back to her as he thanked her for being so kind. All his friends opened their mouths in shock, as this was so unusual of Ayo, who was always arrogant and rude. They laughed at him as they teased him for drinking from a cursed girl's water pot, but Ayo paid no mind to them, as he could not shake off the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. As the days passed, Zara's encounter with Ayo became the subject of gossip in the village, especially as Ayo became terribly ill. Many believed that Ayo had been bewitched by the girl with the strange hair, while others speculated that the curse which followed Zara had transferred into Ayo, making him sick. His rich father did everything within his power to restore his son's health, but as the days went by, Ayo's sickness grew worse. Zara felt so terrible, as everyone believed that she was the cause of his sickness. The accusing eyes pierced through her skin as she walked the streets of the village, and Zara, in that moment, knew that she had to do something about all that was happening. As she returned home that evening, her stepmother called her all sorts of degrading names, saying that her evil hair was the root cause of all the terrible things that had been happening. She called her dreadlocks evil snakes hanging on her head, saying that if she fails to cut her hair, evil will continue to be unleashed. Zara felt so terrible to hear this as she retreated into her hut and began to cry. She took a sharp blade and was about to cut her hair when her mother entered the hut and stopped her. Zara wept uncontrollably as she asked her mother if she was cursed, and her mother told her that her hair was a blessing and that she should not listen to all that the people were saying because she was perfect with her dreadlocks. Night came and Zara could not sleep. She was so worried about the rich man's son, Ayo, as she wondered if she had a hand in his sickness. Zara began to whistle her favorite song, hoping to fall asleep, when she heard a strange sound outside her door. It was late in the night, and Zara was extremely afraid. She decided to check what it was, and was confronted by the sight of a frail old woman sitting under the tree close to her hut. "You called for me," the old woman said, as goosebumps filled Zara's entire body. "What worries you, precious one?" the old woman asked, and stammering out of fear, Zara told the old woman all that had been happening. The old woman listened intently as she spoke. She told Zara that people fear what they cannot understand, and that her dreadlocks were not a curse, but a gift to the entire village. Zara looked at the old woman in confusion as she asked what she meant by a gift. But before she could finish asking the question, the old woman disappeared into the night. Zara returned to her hut, unable to sleep, as she thought about all the old woman had said. She woke up the next morning to a loud noise in front of her hut and realized that a group of villagers had come to take her away. They all believed that Zara was cursed and had to be banished from their village. Zara's mother did all she could to stop them from taking her daughter away, but all her efforts proved futile. So she decided to leave the village with her daughter. Zara and her mother had nowhere to go, so they wandered from one village to the other. The people had never seen anyone with such hair before, and this terrified them, as they wondered if Zara's hair was made of snakes. No one let them settle in their village, so for days Zara and her mother slept in the dark forest as the mosquitoes feasted on their delicate bodies. However, despite the fear and rejection that they faced, Zara's mother never for once faltered in her belief that her daughter's hair was a blessing. She reminded Zara of her ancestry of warriors and healers who had carried the same dreadlocks through the ages, "Your hair is a symbol of strength," her mother said, "and one day it will show its true power to all." Zara clung to her mother's words, but couldn't take her mind off the possibility that the villagers might have been right. So, Zara, while her mother slept one night, snuck out of the forest away from her sleeping mother. It was not an easy decision for Zara, who could not stand the sight of her mother suffering for her sake. She hoped that her absence would force her mother to return to their village, back to her comfort, and she could not stand by and watch her suffer. Zara wandered from one village to the other, hoping to find someone who would accept her for who she was. She faced so many rejections on the way, as people called her a witch and a curse. But Zara did not give up as she kept on going. One night, as Zara lay to sleep in the forest, she saw a strange figure in the distance. It was the figure of a man who moved extremely fast. Zara was terrified as she wondered how a man could move so fast. Filled with terror, Zara tried to run away when the strange-looking man grabbed her by her hair. Zara noticed a bright glow that emanated from her dreadlocks. Zara watched as the strange-looking man transformed into a very handsome man. She was so amazed as she could not believe what had just happened. The young man thanked Zara for saving him and asked what she was doing alone in the forest. Zara explained all she had passed through in the hands of her people, who believed that she was cursed because of her hair. The young man urged Zara to follow him, as he could not watch her live in the forest. They walked into the village, and Zara was met with curious stares, not of fear but of wonder. The young man, who introduced himself as Daniel, was the prince of the village. He explained that an evil witch had cast a spell on him, turning him into a strange being doomed to roam the forest. Only the touch of one with a pure and misunderstood heart could break the curse. Zara, with her unique dreadlocks, was the one destined to break his curse. Daniel then led her to his father, the king, who was a wise and kind man. He listened to Zara's story, his heart moved by the injustice she had endured. Your hair is a gift, young Zara, and it has broken a curse that the most powerful healers could not. We welcome you as our own. Zara, for once in her life, for once in her life, for once in her life, felt accepted by a people who appreciated the power of her locks. Her mother, who never stopped looking for her, learned of her whereabouts and arrived at the palace to see her daughter. Zara was so happy to see her mother, who hugged her tightly. Meanwhile, back in Zara's birth village, Ayo recovered, and the village healer received a revelation that Zara was the only one with the power to heal his sickness. The healer informed Ayo's father of the revelation, and he set out in search of Zara. After a few days, they arrived at Zara's kingdom and were shocked to find Zara living in the palace of the king. The rich man pleaded with Zara to save his son's life, and Zara, filled with compassion, agreed to heal his son, Ayo. When they arrived at their village, Zara went straight to Ayo's side. She let down her dreadlocks and placed them on Ayo's chest. Immediately the locks glowed, and the illness vanished as Ayo regained his health. The entire village rejoiced as the people called out Zara's name in joy. But just as Zara was about to leave Ayo's home, she was told that her stepmother was dying and needed to see her. Zara, confused as to what was happening, arrived at her stepmother's hut and realized that her stepmother was the one behind Ayo's sickness. She had heard of Ayo's encounter with Zara by the riverside and decided to make him extremely sick so that the entire village would point accusing fingers at Zara. Little did she know that her evil plan would lead to her own demise. She admitted that since her husband, who was Zara's father, died, she had been envious of the bond that Zara and her mother shared and decided to break it. The only way to achieve this was to make people believe that Zara was a witch and the one behind Ayo's illness. Her stepmother pleaded for forgiveness, and Zara wasted no time forgiving her. Zara tried to use her hair to save her stepmother's life, but noticed that her hair failed to glow. It was then that she heard a silent voice in her heart saying that her stepmother's heart was still filled with so much evil for her, and that until she purged herself of such evil, she would die. Zara pleaded with her stepmother to let go of the evil, but she refused and died in her wickedness. The entire village was shaken at the revelation as they apologized to Zara for how badly they had treated her. As the days went by, Prince Daniel found himself visiting Zara's village more often. With each visit, the bond between them blossomed like a tree in full bloom. One evening, as Zara and the prince decided to take a stroll to the village stream, the prince spoke to her, saying that since the day she walked into his life, she healed not only his curse, but his heart. The prince told Zara that he couldn't think of anyone else to walk beside him as he led his people, and asked if she would do him the honor of being his bride. Zara, filled with excitement, agreed to marry the prince as she loved him so dearly. That was how Zara, the girl born with dreadlocks, became a queen after suffering years of rejection and discrimination. This story teaches us that we should never judge or discriminate against others based on their differences or what we don't understand. Fear and ignorance often lead to injustice, but kindness, acceptance, and an open heart can uncover the beauty and power within others. True strength lies in embracing uniqueness, and even the most misunderstood can have a purpose beyond our imagination. Always choose kindness, for it can heal wounds, change lives, and even break curses. Thank you for watching our channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to see more inspiring and fascinating stories. Stay tuned for the next exciting video. We can't wait to share it with you. In the big, busy city of Lagos, there lived a young woman named Chinyere. She worked as a bank teller, counting money all day, but Chinyere wanted more. She dreamed of fancy clothes, big houses, and shiny cars. Every night she would look at fashion magazines and wish she could buy all the pretty things. The tiny apartment she shared with her younger sister felt even smaller as she flipped through the glossy pages, imagining herself in those glamorous outfits. Chinyere had a friend named Chike. He was a teacher at a small school. Chike didn't have much money, but he had a big heart. He loved Chinyere very much and wanted to marry her. Chike would bring Chinyere small gifts like flowers or chocolates. He would take her on simple dates to the park or local restaurants, where they would sit on wooden benches under the shade of big trees, laughing about the little things in life. But Chinyere wasn't sure about Chike. She liked him, but she worried about money. Chike is nice, she thought, but when will he ever be rich? I don't want to be poor all my life. So even though Chike was kind and loving, Chinyere kept her heart closed. One day, Chinyere went to the gym to exercise. As she was leaving, she saw something that made her stop and stare. A big, shiny black car pulled up in front of the gym. It was the kind of car Chinyere had only seen in movies. The car door opened, and out stepped a tall, handsome man. He was wearing a suit that looked very expensive. This man was named Obinna. He was a rich businessman who owned many companies. Obinna saw Chinyere looking at him and smiled. He walked right up to her. "Hello, beautiful lady," said Obinna. "I'm new at this gym. Could you show me around?" Chinyere felt her heart beat fast. She had never talked to such a rich and handsome man before. "Of course," she said, trying to sound calm. "I'd be happy to show you." Over the next few weeks, Obinna and Chinyere spent a lot of time together. Obinna took Chinyere to fancy restaurants she had never been to before. The tables were set with white tablecloths and sparkling silverware, and waiters in crisp uniforms served dishes with names she couldn't even pronounce. He bought her expensive clothes and jewelry. Chinyere felt like she was living in a dream. She quickly forgot all about Chike and his simple gifts. After only 2 months of dating, Obinna asked Chinyere to marry him. He gave her a ring with the biggest diamond Chinyere had ever seen. Chinyere was so excited, she said yes right away. She didn't stop to think if she really knew Obinna well enough to marry him. When Chinyere told her parents about the engagement, they were overjoyed. "Our daughter is marrying a rich man," they said happily. "Now all our problems are over." They didn't ask Chinyere if she really loved Obinna. They only cared about his money. But not everyone was happy about the engagement. When Chike heard the news, he was heartbroken. He came to Chinyere's house to talk to her one last time. The small living room, with its faded cushions and peeling paint, felt heavier than ever as Chike stood by the door, clutching a small bouquet of daisies. "Please, Chinyere," Chike begged. "Don't marry this man you barely know. I love you, And I promise I will work hard to give you a good life. It might not be a rich life, but it will be a happy one. For a moment, Chinyere felt uncertain. She remembered all the good times she had with Chike. But then she looked down at her big diamond ring. She thought about Obina's fancy car and big house. I'm sorry, Chike, she said, but I've made my choice. I'm going to marry Obina. Chike left with tears in his eyes. Chinyere felt a little sad, but she told herself she was doing the right thing. I'll be rich, she thought. That's what's most important. The wedding day arrived. It was the biggest, fanciest wedding anyone in Lagos had ever seen. Chinyere wore a beautiful white dress that cost more money than she used to make in a year at the bank. The venue was decorated with crystal chandeliers, cascading flower arrangements, and gold-trimmed chairs. Everyone was talking about how lucky she was to marry such a rich man. Chinyere's parents couldn't stop smiling. They kept telling everyone how proud they were. Obina looked handsome in his expensive suit. When he put the gold wedding ring on Chinyere's finger, Chinyere felt like all her dreams had come true. But as soon as the wedding was over, things started to change. Obina took Chinyere to his big mansion. Chinyere was excited to see her new home, but when they went inside, she got a surprise. The house was big, but it felt cold and empty. There were no family photos on the walls, no colorful pillows on the couches. I didn't feel like a home at all, but that wasn't the biggest shock. Everywhere Chinyere looked, she saw dogs, big dogs, small dogs, all kinds of dogs. There were at least 20 dogs running around the house. Their barking echoed through the marble hallways. Welcome home, my dear, said Obina. I hope you like dogs. They are very important to me. Chinyere was confused. Obina had never said anything about liking dogs before, but she didn't want to seem ungrateful, so she tried to smile. Of course, she said. They're lovely. That night, Chinyere got another big surprise. She thought she and Obina would sleep in the same room, like most married couples. But Obina went to sleep in a different room, and he took his favorite dog, a big Rottweiler, with him. Don't worry, Obina told Chinyere when he saw her confused face. This is just how things are done in my family. The dogs are very special. You'll understand soon. Chinyere didn't understand at all, but she was too afraid to ask questions. She went to her room alone, feeling very strange and lonely. Days passed, and Chinyere grew more and more unhappy. Obina spent all his time with the dogs. He hardly ever talked to Chinyere, except to tell her to feed the dogs or clean up after them. Chinyere felt more like a servant than a wife. One day, about a week after the wedding, something happened that scared Chinyere very much. She was walking past Obina's office when she heard him talking on the phone. Chinyere didn't mean to listen, but she heard something that made her stop. Yes, the marriage is complete, Obina was saying. Now the dog's power will be even stronger. My wealth will double this year. Chinyere felt like her blood turned to ice. She realized with horror that Obina had married her for some strange reason involving his dogs. She wasn't a wife to him at all. She was just part of some weird plan to make more money. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on her as she struggled to grasp the reality of her situation. Chinyere ran to her room and cried. She felt stupid and ashamed. She had married a man she barely knew, all because she wanted to be rich. Now she was trapped in a big, cold house full of dogs with a husband who didn't love her at all. The once beautiful diamond ring on her finger now felt like a heavy chain binding her to a life she no longer wanted. Chinya thought about calling her parents, but she was too embarrassed. They were so proud of her rich husband. How could she tell them the truth? And where would she go if she left? She had quit her job at the bank when she got married. She had no money of her own. Even the clothes she wore now were gifts from Obina, making her feel even more powerless. For days, Chinyere walked around the big house like a ghost. She fed the dogs and cleaned up after them, but her heart wasn't in it. She felt lost and alone. The sound of the dogs barking echoed through the empty hallways, amplifying her loneliness. She thought about Chika and wondered if he ever thought about her. Memories of his warm smile and the way he used to make her laugh began to haunt her. I made such a big mistake, she thought. But now it's too late. But there was one person in the house who was kind to Chinyere. This was Zara, the maid. Zara had worked for Obina for many years. She could see how sad Chinyere was. One day, while they were folding laundry together in the dimly lit laundry room, Zara decided to speak up. Madam, Zara said quietly, looking around to make sure no one could hear. I know you are not happy here. This is not a good place. The master, he does bad things with those dogs. You should leave before it's too late. Chinyere was shocked. She hadn't realized Zara could see how unhappy she was. And what did Zara mean about Obina doing bad things with the dogs? But Chinyere was too afraid to ask. But how can I leave? Chinyere whispered back. I have nowhere to go, and Obina will never let me leave. He'll be so angry. Zara patted Chinyere's hand gently. Don't worry, she said. I will help you. But first, you must pray. Ask God for forgiveness for marrying for money. Ask for strength to do the right thing. Then we will make a plan. Chinyere nodded, feeling a small spark of hope for the first time in weeks. That night, she knelt by her bed and prayed harder than she ever had before. God, please forgive me, she whispered. I was foolish and greedy. Please give me the strength to fix my mistake. As the days passed, Chinyere kept praying every night. She started to feel a little stronger. She began to think that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way out of this bad situation. One afternoon, about a month after Chinyere's wedding, Zara came to her with excitement in her eyes. They were in the kitchen, pretending to sort vegetables when Zara whispered the plan. Madam, she said, I have good news. The master will be away at a big business dinner tomorrow night. That's our chance. I will call a taxi for you. Pack only what you need, some clothes, and any money you have. I'll leave the back door unlocked. As soon as it gets dark, you must run and not look back. Chinyere felt scared but also relieved. This was her chance to escape. She hugged Zara tightly. Thank you, she whispered. I'll never forget how kind you've been to me. That night, Chinyere couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what would happen the next day. Would she really have the courage to leave? Where would she go? But she knew one thing for sure, anywhere was better than staying in this strange, cold house with a man who saw her as part of a business deal. The next day arrived, and Chinyere felt both scared and excited. She kept checking the clock, waiting for evening to come. Every time Obina walked by, her heart beat faster. She was afraid he would somehow know what she was planning. Finally, Obina left for his business dinner. As soon as his car drove away, Chinyere ran to her room. She pulled her packed suitcase from under the bed. Then she waited, listening for Zara's signal. At last, Zara knocked softly on her door. "It's time, madam," she whispered. "The taxi is waiting down the street. Go now and be safe." Chinyere hugged Zara one last time. Then she took a deep breath and walked to the back door. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. For a moment, she hesitated. Was she really brave enough to do this? But then she thought about how unhappy she had been. She thought about Obina's strange behavior and the scary things he said about the dogs. Chinyere knew she had to leave. She ran down the driveway and out to the street. Just as Zara had said, a taxi was waiting. Chinyere jumped in, her heart pounding. "Where to, madam?" the driver asked. Chinyere thought for a moment. There was only one place she could go, her parents' house. Even if they were angry, she knew they would take her in. "Number 15 Mango Street," she told the driver. Then she sat back, watching the city lights pass by. She felt scared but also relieved. She was free. When Chinyere arrived at her parents' house, they were very surprised to see her. At first, they didn't believe her story about Obina and the dogs. They thought she was making excuses because she didn't want to be married anymore. But when they saw the fear in Chinyere's eyes, they realized she was telling the truth. Chinyere's mother started to cry. "Oh, my daughter," she said, hugging Chinyere tight. "We are so sorry. We should have listened to you before the wedding. We were too excited about the money. Can you ever forgive us?" Chinyere cried too, but they were tears of relief. "Of course I forgive you," she said. "I'm just glad to be home." For the next few weeks, Chinyere stayed inside her parents' house. She was afraid Obina would come looking for her, but he never did. It seemed he had simply moved on to find another wife for his strange dog rituals. Slowly, Chinyere started to rebuild her life. She went back to her old job at the bank. The manager was happy to have her back because she had always been a good worker. Chinyere spent time with her family and started to feel like herself again. But something was still missing. Chinyere couldn't stop thinking about Chaik, the kind teacher she had rejected. She felt terrible about how she had treated him. Even if he didn't want to see her, Chinyere knew she needed to apologize. One day, Chinyere gathered all her courage and went to Chik's school. But when she arrived, she got a big surprise. The school was much bigger than before. There was a shiny new sign that said Chaik's Academy for Gifted Children. Confused, Chinyere went inside. The school looked very different. Everything was new and modern. There were many classrooms, and Chinyere could hear children laughing and learning. Then she saw Chaik. He was standing in the hallway talking to a group of parents. He was wearing a nice suit and looked very confident. When he saw Chinyere, his eyes got wide with surprise. "Chinyere," he said, "what are you doing here?" Chinyere's heart sank. Chaik looked so successful now. He had probably forgotten all about her. But she had come this far, so she decided to tell the truth. "Chike, can we talk?" she asked. "I need to tell you something important." Chaik nodded and led her to his office. It was a big, nice room with awards on the walls, on the large window overlooking the school courtyard. Chinyere took a deep breath and started to speak. "Chaik, I made a terrible mistake," she said. "I married a bad man because I was greedy for money. But now I've left him. I know it's too late, but I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. You were always the better man. Cheek was quiet for a long moment. Chinyere was sure he was going to ask her to leave. But then he smiled softly. Chinyere, he said, it's never too late to fix a mistake. Why don't you sit down? Let's talk. For the next few hours, Chinyere and Chai talked. Chinyere told him everything that had happened with Obina. She cried as she described how lonely and scared she had been. Chike listened without judging her, occasionally nodding or offering her a tissue. I'm so sorry you went through that, he said when she finished. It must have been very hard. But Chinyere, I have something to tell you too. Chike explained that after Chinyere rejected him, he had been very sad. But instead of giving up, he worked harder than ever. He found people who believed in his ideas for a better school. They gave him money to make the school bigger and better. In a way, losing you made me push myself harder. Chike said, I wanted to prove that I could be successful. Chinyere's eyes filled with tears. You've done so well, Chike. I'm happy for you. I just wish. She couldn't finish her sentence, but Chike seemed to understand. He reached out and took her hand. Chinyere, he said gently, there's something else you should know. I'm married now. My wife and I are expecting a baby soon. Chinyere felt her heart drop. Of course, Chike was married. How could she have hoped otherwise? She started to stand up, feeling embarrassed. But then Chike continued. Wait, Chinyere, there's more. My wife has been looking for someone to manage the school's money, someone with experience in banking. Would you be interested in that job? Chinyere looked up in shock. You'd give me a job after everything, Chike smiled. The past is the past. You've learned. Learn from your mistakes. Now it's time to move forward. What do you say? Chinyere couldn't believe it. This was more than she had ever hoped, for a chance to work at a good job, to be near Chick as a friend. It was a new start. Yes, she said, smiling through her tears. Yes, I'd love to. From that day on, Chinyere's life began to change. She threw herself into her new job at Chike School. She was good with numbers, and she loved helping the school grow. For the first time in a long time, Chinyere felt proud of herself. Chike's wife, Zara, turned out to be very kind. She didn't treat Chinyere like someone from Chike's past. Instead, she welcomed Chinyere as a friend. Soon, Chinyere was spending time with both Chike and Zara. She even helped them get ready for their new baby. Months passed, and Chinyere grew stronger and happier. She still lived with her parents, but now she was saving money for her own small apartment. She had new friends at work and was even thinking about taking some night classes to learn new skills. One evening, as Chinyere was walking home from work, she passed the gym where she had first met Obina. She stopped and looked at it for a moment. Then she smiled and kept walking. That part of her life was over. She had learned an important lesson, but she wasn't going to let it hold her back anymore. When Chinyere got home, she found her mother cooking dinner. Her father was reading the newspaper. It was a simple, happy scene. Chinyere realized that this was what she had been looking for all along, not fancy clothes or big houses, but love and peace. That night, as she got ready for bed, Chinyere said a prayer of thanks. She was grateful for her second chance at a good life. She had learned that true happiness doesn't come from money or fancy things. It comes from doing work you care about, being with people who love you, and being true to yourself. Chinyere thought about how far she had come. She had made a big mistake, but she had found the courage to fix it. Now, she had a job she liked, good friends, and a family who supported her. She even had a small savings account that was growing every month. Maybe someday I'll find someone to love, Chinyere thought as she drifted off to sleep. But for now, I'm happy just as I am. The next morning, Chinyere woke up early. She put on her work clothes and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a strong woman who had been through hard times but came out stronger. She was proud of who she had become. As Chinyere walked to work, she smiled at the people she passed. The sun was shining and she felt full of hope. She knew there would still be hard days ahead. Life wasn't always easy, but now she had the strength to face whatever came her way. Chinyere walked into the school, ready to start another day. As she passed Chike's office, he waved at her with a friendly smile. Zara was there too, her belly big with a baby that would arrive soon. They both looked happy to see Chinyere. At that moment, Chinyere knew for sure that everything would be okay. She had found her place in the world. It wasn't the life she had once dreamed of, full of riches and fancy things, but it was real, and it was good. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. The story of Chinyere teaches us a powerful lesson. True happiness and fulfillment do not come from wealth or material possessions, but from love, integrity, and meaningful relationships. Chinyere's journey reminds us to think carefully about the choices we make and the values we prioritize. She learned the hard way that greed and superficial desires can lead to emptiness and regret, while kindness, hard work, and staying true to oneself bring lasting peace and joy. It's never too late to correct our mistakes, as Chinyere did, and find a life filled with purpose and love. Thank you for watching my channel. If you enjoyed this story and its lessons, don't forget to check out more inspiring and fascinating videos on my channel. See you in the next one. They did a very low-key, poor traditional marriage, and all the villagers laughed at them to scum, especially the ladies he had asked out. Their marriage became a thing of mockery. The village of Okoroba was a small, close-knit community where news traveled fast and gossip thrived. In this village, there lived a man named Jabulani. Jabulani was a simple farmer. He planted crops and cleared people's farms to survive. His family was so poor that even the poor in the village called them poor. Their home was an old, dilapidated mud house with a thatched roof that leaked whenever it rained. He was the only child of Grandma and Grandpa Moyo. In his entire lifetime, all Grandpa Moyo had achieved was an old bicycle, which he still rides along the dusty village paths. Grandpa Moyo was nearly 85 years old, but was very strong and smart and still goes to the farm. His wrinkled hands bore the marks of years of toil under the scorching sun. He was a very poor man, but was always a cheerful old man, known for his wise sayings and hearty laughter. He believed his son wouldn't end up poor like him, even though he didn't know how. Some days, Jabulani would cry, looking at their very old house, his parents, and the fact that he couldn't do anything to help their situation at the moment killed him the most. The sight of his frail mother struggling to prepare their meager meals pained him deeply. He couldn't even further his school, but stopped at high school. The weight of their poverty often bore down on his shoulders like a heavy burden, but Grandpa would encourage him and tell him, "You would be a great man someday, son. Just do what you're doing. Don't stain your hands. Let your conscience be pure and keep working hard. One day